All right, guys, let's jump into just a quick little thing here. Not much has changed just in regards to the names that we're currently in. It really just kind of comes down to either we get stopped out or we add in, right? It's one of the two, and then obviously trims at targets. But I told you guys this is going to be pretty boring, and I'm really sorry, but the risk to reward here is just so worth it. And really just kind of building out a position. This is how the big boys do it, and I think I see a huge opportunity here with 3 or 4 names, and I'm kind of just sticking to these. So yeah, I'm not going to apologize for it. But yeah, MU still looks good, right? It doesn't look good enough to add just yet. If you guys kind of look at this, we're at the bottom of this gap here from 95.77. You guys remember this is the big gap up from its previous earnings, and it's really just kind of created this range and then trickled down to the bottom of the range. Normally I would add into this one, but I just don't want to be a bottom feeder, right, and just keep adding into, just because it's at the lows doesn't mean it can't go lower, right? I obviously for this name want to add in on trend, especially with it how it really hasn't had any big volume. I don't want to add unless there's other big buyers that give me an opportunity to jump in with them, right? And this could be an accumulation range. I just have no idea without seeing some kind of footprint candle, and the odds of it breaking under 95.77 and it trading down to 90.9, I wouldn't say they're high, but I don't want to just be adding into a loser. Now, this is important because you guys can clearly see this red line here. This was right around 98, 94. This was the bounce level, right? It obviously pushed up to 115. It bounced again, pushed up to 115, and then it kind of caught one more time, got that lower high at the midpoint of this range that it's created, right around that huge pivotal level at 105 to 108 I've been talking about, and then it broke back down, right? No high volume still, which is, I wouldn't say it's concerning. We just need the volume to start kind of coming in. I said it would probably be the beginning of the month of December, maybe the first 2 weeks of December. But yeah, normally I would add here. Just don't want to add into a loser, even if the pricing seems good. You can always go lower. I would like to see this get above 98, 94, kind of reclaim the bottom of this old range. Then I would start to add, right? This could be kind of considered like your higher low at the bottom extreme. And then what I would like to see is a continuation up to 105, 108, maybe reclaim 105 and just really start to base this mid ground or the equilibrium of this entire zone here as support. And then I think we can get a big pop out to 115. This chart really starts to get exciting once we break out 115, guys. Once we get 115, we have very, very, I would say low volume. Obviously, we can consider the historical data back here, but just from the previous range, right, I think this would be an easy short cover or a low volume melt up for us to move up to that 123, maybe a flag, right? You guys kind of know the drill by this point. And then ideally, we get up to 127, 130, and that would be target for the full close. So just want to be careful with this one. I don't want to be adding into a loser. The January contract should be kind of, if you guys want to close them full, I did already. But new contracts that I've been kind of reiterating are the new contracts to kind of take and be adding into are the Junes. Would not add any more until we're above 98, 94 once again. And if we break and slip under 95.77, I think a stop out is probably the best decision, and just waiting for this gap here at 90.9 and then looking to reload. But just from a chart perspective, guys, this chart looks still really good. If we back out to the weekly, I know the daily's obviously in that little box range without really a footprint candle, so it's kind of hard to decisively do anything. But if we take a look on the weekly, right, just low volume consolidation after a big markup, right? This is what we look for with these type of trades. A lot of premiums have been kind of compressed, not decompressed. We might see a decompression once we get a move, but a lot of compression. A lot of these haven't really lost any value, other than the short-dated ones, which are mainly the Januaries, are starting to get crushed just a tad. But the longer-dated stuff is holding its valuation very nicely. We just need to be able to kind of just sustain here. Sellers, if they do bring in some volume, that it's mitigated very well, which we have seen. I mean, we should have sold pretty aggressively off of this weekly bar, but the fact that we recovered and are pretty much trading in the exact same spot right at the bottom of this zone here is pretty healthy. And yeah, this thing just looks really good still based on the weekly. Doesn't look as concerning as a lot of people I think would think, especially with the volume here. This just looks like a consolidation with a potential higher low right around this zone, whatever it may be. And I think we can just get a nice markup back up to the 127, 123 spot. I mean, guys, this name compared to a lot of the other ones in regards to, like, from a fundamental perspective, this is trading way below the PE of some of its peers, guys. This name is very, very undervalued. It's had 50% revenue growth. I think it's like 600 or 700% EPS. It's a steal. Like, this is 100% a steal right here, guys. So I mean, there's a reason I have kind of I wouldn't say majority of my chips just yet, but I have a lot of chips at the table for this one, and I'm really excited about this. But you know, we are right at that point where it could slip and I would stop out, but I'm okay stopping out and re-adding again. Once again, if it breaks 95.77, looking for that 90.9 re-add. But overall, I mean, this chart just needs a little bit of work here, and it can really start to do something special. But I've primarily just been watching this on the daily and or weekly. I don't have to over manage this one very much at all. So really excited to see what this one does the first week of December, potentially the second week of December, as we start to get that time crunch from that charm, right? That's going to be kicking in as we make our way closer to the holidays here coming up for Christmas. We're going to come into a pinch, right, where a lot of their sensitivity to based on delta, right, is going to be very, very sensitive to the time decay coming into the holidays. So we're going to be seeing a potential crunch where a decision's got to be made. It's not going to just stay compressed like this. So very, very important to keep our eyes on this one, and yeah, just kind of see what ends up happening. All right, Intel, obviously should be familiar here as well, right? This is very easy. Remember, it broke out above 24.59. If you still don't know the relevance of 24.59, it's okay. I got you guys. It's this old support back here, right? It was the old high from right here. So if you guys remember, we had this high where a bottom was found. It ended up breaking out on high volume. It ended up pulling back for about 6 weeks and kind of flagged back onto this old high right here. And then what did we do? We ended up popping again back above not only this high here that was resistance, but we cracked right above this old support and had opportunity to make it support again. And it's doing the same exact thing, right? If we take a look, I'll zoom in a little bit less, right? It's been about 3 weeks now of just consolidation at that level. Sure, we've undercut the level a little bit lower than I would have liked, but it's okay. We ended up leaving behind a gap from the previous breakout, right? If you guys can see, we ended up gapping up. We ended up pressing up to 26.6 and then sold off on, once again, pretty low volume. It hasn't been pretty drastic at all. And it basically sold all the way back down to fill the gap and then ended up printing a hammer. Now the hammer, albeit is on lower volume, as you guys can tell, but it was a short week last week, so I'm not putting too much emphasis or thought into the volume behind last week, especially on daily and or weekly candles. But just a good overall sign that there were buyers here, even on a short week, a holiday week. And we ended up grinding a little bit higher. Now, really, I would just like to see this push back above 24.59 and then pull back or consolidate on it for a couple days. And I'd be willing to add even more into this trade, maybe another 5 to 10 contracts, and really just kind of look for this to confirm a breakout, right? And this starts to look good again once it gets back above 26.38, just this old high here. It's going to be very reminiscent of this old high breakout, once again, where we chopped around for a little bit and ended up popping, and then it pulled back and based. It might do the same thing where it ends up breaking out above 26.38, right, and then ends up kind of chopping here. I know some people don't like the fact that stocks pull back. It's okay, but it might do that where it chops on that high and then tries to continue out again. Hopefully it doesn't take another 3 to 4 weeks similar to this one. Hopefully we end up having some good momentum behind it. But overall, right, this is kind of what I'm looking at. Once again, there's a reason I took June contracts. We can be able to sit through this and not have to overthink the fact that this is taking a long time. The chart is behaving well. Like I said, it's just taking a little bit of time for it to kind of come to fruition, which is totally fine. Target is still very much the same, guys. It's a move back up to 29.05 to 29.65, right? It's to fill this gap here or trade back to this previous support. And that's really it. I haven't really done much else behind this. 23.32 is still risk here with like a weekly candle close underneath, in my opinion. If you guys, if you guys are still in this one, there's no real reason to cut. It's still just, holding pretty nicely, even on the weekly, right? The weekly just simply looks like a flag. Like I said, it's undercut it just a little bit, but nothing drastic in terms of volume here, as you guys can see. It's just been diverging. No real high volume, no real threat in terms of a really nasty bearish print on the weekly. So this has been a pretty easy hold. It's just been about patience. And that's pretty much all this is going to take. It's just patience and then just watching your levels. So this name still looks healthy. I just wanted to cover it really quick. All right, and everybody's favorite chart. This one has been a pain, but once again, I think it's very similar to the potential in an RR fashion to MU, where it has a lot of good upside potential with low risk. Obviously, the lagger in ARKK, and it has done similar things to Intel, right, where it's undercut risk just a little bit, but it's important to have that context as to how you're going to hold that based on your expiration. We have till March. Some of you guys, I think, have Junes as well. But this chart looks fantastic still. It did undercut it just a tiny bit with these two bars here from 1127 and 1126. But it got the close back above 68. Right, I've talked about the 68 level as much as I can, right? It's this old gap here, this old kind of consolidation where we saw multiple rejections off of this. We ended up breaking back above that, right? We got a gap up and hold above this. We ended up pushing out, right? We had our kind of like distribution off of this high at the gap. We ended up selling. It's very important to also note that this was our gap or the open, right, from that gap. This is this is kind of like our footprint candle that we can base it off from more recent ranges. But we ended up kind of breaking down. We had a big buyer step in, and this was 100% buying, guys. If you go to the 4 hour, you guys go to the hourly, you guys can see this was buying here. It wasn't really a breakdown or a capitulation, but it came right off of this like trend line. Remember, the trend line is subjective, so it was just a high or low. That's how we have to look at this. But ended up breaking out. We never got the pullback, which is why I never added on this big move up, but we ended up pushing right back up towards these highs at 78.61. And notice the shooting star, but very, very abysmal volume, right? This isn't really an indication that there was a heavy seller here. And remember, I tried to take the pullback with my starters off the EMAs. That was a mistake. That's why I never take EMA flags. It is what it is, but it ended up pulling all the way down to the 68 level, which was our final retest of this spot. This is where I started to build the position right around 68. And of course, right, we kind of broke underneath 68, but it's important to understand and have context, right? So weekly close was everything, and we finally peeked our head back above on Friday with a very, very strong close there, albeit volume, once again, not as good as we'd like, but it was a short week, so not overthinking it. But we got the close above 68. Now, it's really important to kind of note that the reclaim of this spot right here, I'll zoom in right off the 68 spot, was the higher volume, right? All of this was low volume, right? I mean, the buy right here off of this trend line or this higher low with that large lower wick was some of your higher volume, which is indication of buying, right? We ended up moving up through this zone on low volume because a lot of the inventory is now in control, right? We started to sell off, so it doesn't mean that supply is being offloaded just yet. I would be concerned if it was high volume here, but the fact that it pulled back down, isn't indicative of selling. It's indicative more so of buyers, right? What do you think they're doing, guys? They're probably bidding underneath each new spot to try to get fills, right? And they're ultimately bidding the most feasible spot. I thought it was 68, and obviously it came a little bit lower, and some of those guys got better fills. But as it hit 68, notice the buyers here, right? Once again, this is where our high volume kicks in. We had a large lower wick, obviously an upper wick, and that's where we can do a little bit of digging. This is the 1 minute chart from that day, right? You guys can note a lot of that volume came in the first minute, the second minute. Obviously, we had a rejection here on the third minute, but that's where that large upper wick came from. So it really wasn't much from this large upper wick. This wasn't a lot of the sellers that really had a lot to say in this volume on the daily. It was more so, right, the fact that the buyers bought the lows in these two first bars here, right? And if this first bar was super bearish, it would have sent us way deeper. And this is where I talk about spread. This would have really created some separation below 68. If you take a look, right, for all that volume on the first minute candle, we really just hovered around here. So this is 100% buying, right? This is 100% buying. Somebody big got in this spot on the tape here within the first 2 minutes, and I'm sure they slowly built their position out probably till like 740, so the first 10. So they probably got a lot of their positions filled there. Now it's important now to kind of note that we kind of just hovered here, right, for 3-4 days. We obviously undercut that spot, but we didn't break underneath this low from 1120, and now we reclaimed back above 68. So this chart looks super good, guys. This literally looks like an SOS, right? So some kind of sign of strength after an accumulation, which is obviously back here. This looks like it just kind of broke out, pulled back towards that old high, and it's just consolidating here. On the weekly, guys, this chart looks so freaking good, dude. This chart looks so good. I just need to see it start to press, man. I need to see this start creating separation away from 68 now and start to trend back up to 78.61. I guarantee if we get up to 78.61, it will be a much different story. We will not see any kind of rejection here. In my opinion, we'll see a harmonic breakout with high volume, a really strong bar that actually gets through that absorbed 78.61, right, and really closes us above with some good volume, right, and some good separation. And I would be okay with a pullback and a hold, right, and then look for this to continue up further. But overall, chart still looks really good. I don't think there's any reason to panic on this one still. Honestly, I might even change my risk a little bit. I don't think it'll be under 68 anymore. I think I might just risk this this subjective trend line, which I usually don't do, but I want to be able to have some breathing room on this name just because it looks so good, guys. And if we can catch this move, right, if we let's just say that our entry's right at 68.03 perfectly, I mean, that's a 34% move on the underlying. That matches MU, that matches Intel, so it'd be a 30-30-30. Yielding about 90% between three different names in equity, right? So amazing opportunity between those three names. That's why I've been so locked on those ones. From an options perspective, I might be a little bit off. You guys can go back test it, but I'm pretty sure MU with the 130 calls in June would probably be about $1,700 per contract. I think it's like 190%. Excuse me, obviously that would adjust a little bit. That's a calculation without IV, so just give or take, right? Intel would be right about 170%, and then Roku would be about 270, right? So this would be insane wins, insane wins on this one. So I'm really excited for these three charts specifically. And that's why I keep tapping into these ones. I keep talking about these ones. It may be boring, but sometimes boring trades are the best ones. So yeah, so I just wanted to update those really quickly for you guys, and then we'll jump into some newer ones. I think you guys might have saw it on my watch list on TradingView, but some familiar ones, some newer ones that I'm kind of keeping my eyes on. And I'm sure you guys are going to know that I've talked about 2 or 3 of these already, and I've traded them previously, but they're just kind of remaking their way back on the watch list. Okay, guys, Nike, really good chart here. Obviously, I added back here on 11/22, somewhere throughout this daily bar, but really simple chart, right? Just to kind of talk through it. If you guys remember back here, right, this was 2022. This is a monthly chart, so you won't be able to see it, but on the daily, there was a gap back here, and we sold all the way back into it, right, on our trajectory back down, and we had an anomaly print that occurred right back here in July. Very high volume, some of the highest volume we've seen since that print back here in 2022. But look at the difference of the spread of the candle. Very tight spread, right? So very concentrated into that monthly candle. And take a look at the difference between the spread on this candle, how massive the difference between the high and the low is versus this one. But this one had way more volume. So an anomaly print 100%. Then right after that, we can clearly see it marked up, and this is actually when Bill Ackman said that he took a position in it, right? So I think we saw a markup that was a little premature, hence the move up on low volume. Remember, it did pull back and it did retest essentially the gap fill, which is back here, right? So it did break and breach the. Excuse me, I keep burping. It breached the gap. Obviously, the gap goes up to 93.39. But it did break into it. It kind of fizzled out, had no fumes. It pulled back, retested the actual gap here, and then it ended up popping for a new high, but kind of the same situation, right, where we ended up kind of losing fumes. We didn't have enough inventory collected, and it started its trajectory back down, right? Very simple. We even had a gap to the upside from 87.71 to 85. Mind you, I'm just using the wicks on this one to kind of portray the actual gap that you guys can visibly see. You know, the actual fills are 89 to, where's the open? 82, 89, right? So that's the actual gap. But remember, it just basically sold all the way back down, all the way back down. But the most important part of this entire chart is it sold all the way back down, all the way nearly to where Bill Ackman said he got in, right? Either back there to 80 or 77, or if you guys want to consider it, it basically sold all the way back down to the prior accumulation to actually get those fills, in my opinion, that ended up happening before the premature move with the Bill Ackman news, right? So this basically pulled all the way back down to some of the best fills that you can get. Made a lot of sense to kind of keep your eyes on this chart, and of course we had a pretty good hammer here. We ended up getting our markup, and this is where it really caught my eye. It was the second day continuation. So once we got above the high from 11.21, this is where I added, and I was hoping for it to kind of move back up towards the top of this daily wick, and we did, right? We had a pretty good move on these. I think they went like 27% or whatnot. Once again, we ended up hitting the wick here on the daily gap. and we pulled back down, and we're basically basing off of the 77.5 level. You guys should know this is some of the stuff I trade over and over again, which is the rejection of a gap that's absorbed already, the pullback into the gap up, which we clearly had from this day on 11/22, and we consolidated here, right? So this is a prime re-entry. I should have taken more contracts, but what I'll do, and this is why I wanted to cover this, is I'll likely take call or even more calls and add into that position on a break above 79.05, right? If we can get above that spot there, I think this is good to continue to add into those, and I think this has a pretty easy trajectory for a move back up. Maybe it pulls back and holds 79, but I think this can easily move back up to 85 to 87, right? Best case scenario is it does fill this gap way up here at like 93 to like 94, right? I think that would be picture perfect world. It would take a lot of time, in my opinion, for it to do that, or some kind of crazy news catalyst. But this trade looks really good for new ads onto these. So it's something I just wanted to kind of keep an emphasis on. If you guys take a look at the weekly as well, some of the best weekly charts I've seen in a while, right? The simple pullback, really strong hammer here with high volume right off of that old accumulation zone at that 2022 zone, and then literally a move higher, right? A doji here, which we know that doji is just a simple pullback or a flag. So this is a really good neutral zone to be taking calls if it can just continue above 79.05, and I think this sees an easy move back up to 85 at the very least. So really good chart here. Just want to keep our attention on it for potential ads. So if I do say I'm adding into this one or starting a roll or something like that, it shouldn't take you guys off guard because this is a very A+ chart. All right, guys, if you guys remember Roblox, I have been talking about this one forever. We actually took a position back here. I think it was the Hindenburg report or maybe the Citron. It was one of those hedge funds that said they were short Roblox. Didn't matter, right? This was a footprint candle, so it was important to kind of watch the reaction off of this. Remember, it ended up popping and then pulling back really nicely on a 39.01, which was this progression gap here. It just lined up so perfectly. If you guys remember, we took the position, I think, on this doji here, and then I ended up closing somewhere here around like 43, 44. I didn't want to hold into earnings, and that was a mistake. I wholeheartedly admit that, but I was waiting for kind of like a jump the creek and an SOS, which, dude, guys, this chart is so crazy because we literally have that, right? We ended up popping above, and I'll zoom out real quick. This may not do it justice. I'll try my best to capture this all in one frame, but this is kind of like that zone, right? This is kind of like our creek, if you will. Really, it's like right around here. I should probably make some of these red so you guys can see, but this is like the first one right here. What kind of red should we do? That. We'll kind of consider the gap here, that as well. But really, right, this is kind of like our creek area, and I'll talk about it, but this was, in my opinion, the AR, and this is our consolidation / lower high zone right before we end up hitting our automatic reaction, right? And I'll put it on a screen so you guys can see, but we ended up popping out, right? We ended up hitting our automatic reaction, which should act as a resistance right away, but then it pulled back, and this is almost like a perfect SOS or LPS, right? Where we pull back, we're now basing this old kind of consolidation / resistance, and we can get an easy markup to take us through the AR, pull back, hold the AR, and then pop into what? Very important that we can talk about this, which we have a gap over here, right? And it's not the perfect gap, if you will, right? Remember, this is technically, it starts here at 55.99, which we should just round to like 56. And then here should be all the way up here at the close at 73. So massive gap for this to mark up into. But good opportunity here. Once again, I'll kind of zoom in just so you guys can see. And then I'll put this on the screen here, right? This is what an accumulation looks like, right? Where we have kind of like your sell climax, and obviously we're in a downtrend. After the sell climax, right, we get a pop, which is our automatic reaction. We start to build out the longer term accumulation with multiple tests of a high, albeit it's on low volume, and then we make our way back down, or just simply just bidding, right? And then we start to get the high volume spring. We pop, and usually after the sell test here, or the spring, or whatever comes first, right, we end up getting a markup, and that's usually from some kind of earnings. It can happen intraday, which is very rare, but we end up jumping through not only the automatic reaction, but that resistance that's also built out just slightly below, which is typically seen as like a consolidation or some kind of lower high just prior to the automatic reaction, and then we get the pullback onto that, right? This chart looks identical, and I've been talking about this for so long, right? If we take a look, almost picture perfect, right? The weekly will do it some more justice. If we take a look at the weekly, guys, like, bro, Bro, guys, please, this is it. This is like, take a look, right? This is like, doesn't get any better than this. And take a look at the weekly chart here, just from like the more, uh, what's the right word? Current 3 or 4 weeks, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 week pullback, diverging volume. Obviously, some good volume that came in. I would say there was good volume here. Obviously, it was a short week, so I can't really say that with a definitive kind of tune to it. But good close here on the weekly, right? So this is giving really good vibes. Really, I would just kind of look to take this if we kind of open a little bit lower than, like I would say 49.24, which is the weekly open, or we open a little closer to 47.50. I think this is worth taking some exposure on, right? I think this is 100% worth taking exposure on. If we start to break out through the weekly high, which is 50.61, right around that range, I would obviously take like one or two. I'm not going to add as many, but the opportunity here for this to trade all the way to 66 is very, very high. So I would be looking for like maybe 3 month, 4 month out contracts to target 66. I think there's going to be a huge move on this name. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. This is a name that I want to keep my eyes on, or at the very least, just get exposure, whether it ends up having a pullback or it ends up breaking a high. I do think that a couple contracts could go a long way here, so definitely want to get something on this name because this is one of the best Wyckoff charts I've seen, without a doubt. Obviously, there's been other ones like Hood, Coin, etc., but this name has been building out for so dang long, and it just looks primed. So, for sure, one of my favorites here. Okay, guys, I know I'm going to get so much hate because Coin and Tesla were supposed to be the pullback names that I was looking for, but these names just don't look good, guys. Like, it's not like a system trade for me. I don't really know how to go about trading this without, like I just wouldn't feel confident in putting any size into this one. I would be just like every other Furu, where you're buying a consolidation at the highs and just hoping it breaks out just because it's been doing that already. It's not my taste, right? I will say Coin did pretty good, where it ended up having this pullback to the bottom of the gap. We broke out, we held the progression gap high, and we just chopped here, right? There was a couple times where it set up for a day trade, even though I felt like, it's not, I haven't been super into day trades lately, so that's why I didn't take this, but it kind of gave it all back, right? On Friday here, we pretty much had an open, a high, and then a low and a close with virtually no lower wicks. There wasn't much of a bid here. Volume, once again, doesn't really kind of come too much into mind because it was a short week, but no buyers pretty much off 296. I don't know. This feels a little bit weird, right? A lot of people I know are drawing like symmetrical triangles and stuff like that. The weekly, just kind of saying hands off for now, right? I mean, I would just call this 3 weekly dojis in a row. Volume's obviously low up here, so we could get some kind of like, I wouldn't say capitulation, but I would like for something like that to happen to sell it back down to 273, maybe reset some risk off of like these old zones here, and I would enter again. But this name just kind of signaling hands off for now, so I apologize. I know that was like a name everybody's looking forward to. Tesla is no different, guys. Like, this is something that I wouldn't really trade. I was hoping that it would sell down to like 320, right? Remember, like I was talking about it pulling back down into this gap here, but we got that crazy pump at the final like 5 minutes on Tesla that reinvigorated IV for some odd reason. But this did virtually what I wanted for the most part, right? We wanted consolidation, right? Kind of at the highs. We wanted a big drastic sell-off to kind of kill premiums that are really exposed. Obviously because of Ivana Charm, right? They're very, very exposed and very time sensitive to the 117 expirations as well as the 1220. And we wanted a drastic drawdown after consolidation to reset kind of risk on those contracts themselves and deteriorate them quite a bit so we can scoop up the discounted options, right? Their premiums. Didn't quite do what I expected, and that Friday close didn't help. So honestly, dude, this is kind of hands off, guys. This is also hands off, unless by some miracle, we can pull back and maybe sell off. Something weird happens where the sells all the way back down to 300. If this comes down to 300, this is going to be a massive long, in my opinion. Something crazy where I would get very, very heavy onto this one. But from like me as a system trader, right? And I would say I'm adverse to risk. I just know when to put risk on the table and when not to. These weekly, daily charts between Coin and Tesla just signal kind of risk off for me. There's a lot of other charts that I think have better risk to reward, better charts that can have set up versus these two, right? That aren't at the highs like this, that are just speculating a breakout while you're sitting and having your contracts deteriorate at highs. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't fathom it. So I apologize, but these two are for sure going to be off of the list. Um, and I think that's honestly kind of it, right? I don't think there's anything else. The only other thing that I wanted to talk about, I'm sorry, is here, right? It's BA. BA I've talked about for a few weeks now, right? Where we were kind of looking for a break back above this footprint candle here. I think this was the Union Strike or the strike ending or whatever back on 1028. And we ended up getting a nice little close back above, right? I mean, we've kind of seen a trickle down effect here with pretty much low vol, with each new low not really having a big push underneath. So that's indicative of potential exhaustion from the sell side. And then once we had that footprint candle, we ended up trickling down even further on low volume. So I was just kind of watching along, to be honest. I was watching along, and we eventually reclaimed it here in 1122. That's when I got into the position. We had a 3 bar, kind of like 1, 2, 3, right? And then we ended up breaking out here on Friday. Really good close. I wish it closed a little bit stronger near the highs, but overall, pretty solid. I think I pushed like 30% or so on these with 4 contracts. These contracts are a little bit pricey, so I kind of want to get them out of my account, if I'm being honest. Each one's 500 per, so I'm in about like 2 grand on this one. And I want to have that 2 grand for other positions. So ideally, right, we get some kind of move here. I don't have to hold these for very long. If I have to hold these for much longer, I'll probably just close out so I can get that money and use it to some other stuff that I'm a little bit more serious about. But if you guys want to hold this one, I think that risk at 147.58 is pretty valid. And we would just expect kind of higher lows, right? This to kind of start trending out to 167 and ultimately push like 173, 175. These could be a big payout even if you guys want to keep like 1 or 2. 4 just seems like a little bit, I wouldn't say too much to me, but I would rather use that 2K, 3K for something else. So just a quick update on this one as well.